human on this planet is enslaved, whether they know it or not. These tools have been rendered obsolete by much more sophisticated methods. That most of the enslaved are unaware of their condition and would in fact argue fiercely that they are free is a testament to the effectiveness of these invisible chains. You've heard the expression, money makes the world go round. There's truth in that. You must work, beg, or steal for that money. Could it be because money and the bling that it buys have become symbols of status and prestige? Money offers an illusory form of social validation, but even those who are not caught up in distinguishing themselves by how much they accumulate still must acknowledge the social stigma that comes with poverty. The combination of these primal motivators, the need for food, shelter, clothing, and social validation, is a very powerful force. It's enough to drive humans to engage in all forms of activity, even to the point of harming themselves or others in the process. The accumulation of money is therefore an accumulation of social and psychological power. And those who control the creation of money control this power at its source. The Federal Reserve is a private institution owned by a cartel of the world's most powerful banks. What never talked about in the mainstream is the fact that the Fed isn't actually loaning out money that they have. They are merely typing those dollars into existence on a computer. You may be inclined to believe that this money is based on some physical backing like gold, but you would be mistaken. The Federal Reserve hasn't owned any gold since the 1930s.
The Federal Reserve does not own any gold at all. We have not owned gold since 1934. So we have not engaged in any gold swaps.
Well, like the Federal Reserve, ordinary banks are allowed to loan out money that they don't have. There are, of course, restrictions. Banks are only allowed to loan out 10 times the amount of money that they actually have. So if Wells Fargo has $1,000, they can loan you $10,000, and they expect you to pay back that $10,000 plus interest. Once you understand that the money that banks loan out isn't actually an asset, but is in fact a piece of legal fiction, it should be clear that you're working for these banks for free. This is a cleverly disguised form of slavery. If you manage to pay your monthly payments, then you are a successful slave, and you are allowed to keep the material comforts that come with that status. But if for some reason you fail to make those monthly payments, then the bank or the IRS comes to take your house, your car, and anything else you have of value. And if somehow, even with this enormous financial advantage, banks still get themselves into trouble, you, the taxpayer, will be forced to bail them out. No matter what, the banks win. To say the game is rigged is an understatement.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
So the U.S. invaded Iraq, the first Gulf War. And after crushing the Iraqi military and destroying their infrastructure, including water purification plants and hospitals, crippling sanctions were imposed which prevented that infrastructure from being rebuilt. These sanctions, which were initiated by Bush Sr. and sustained throughout the entire Clinton administration, lasted for over a decade and were estimated to have killed over 500,000 children. The Clinton administration was fully aware of these figures.
We have heard that half a million children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it? I think this is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it.
In November of 2000, Iraq began selling its oil exclusively in euros. This was a direct attack on the dollar and on U.S. financial dominance, and it wasn't going to be tolerated. In 2003, the U.S. invaded, and once they had control of the country, oil sales were immediately switched back to dollars. This is particularly notable due to the fact that switching back to the dollar meant a 15 to 20% loss in revenue due to the euro's higher value.
If you go outside the city of Atlanta, go east about 60 or 70 miles to the town of Elberton, and then go north on Highway 77 about 10 miles, you'll find off to the right what's called the Georgia Guidestones. Looks kind of like Stonehenge, these big, huge granite rocks set up there. This was done by a guy, we have a pseudonym, came in, paid cash, had this company set these things up in 1980. He called himself R.C. Christian, but that's not his real name. It says right on the stones, a pseudonym, false name. On these Georgia Guidestones, it gives the 10 Commandments for the New World Order. 10 Commandments for the New World Order. The first commandment was to maintain humanity under 500 million. I went there and looked at those things and said, no,
right side of the road was filled with, which I thought was portable toilets. So I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that. And his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. And he says there's 100 at that time, and he said there was 125,000 there.
And the brother of the man that owns this field that the government is leasing this field from to store these disposable coffins, this brother was given 3 years to set up temporary morgues around the country.
Eco-science, written by the White House science czar John P. Holdren. They talk about a planetary police state to carry out the forced sterilization. They also talk about covert systems in the water and food to sterilize the population. Now, this was written decades ago, before he was White House science czar. Now suddenly, the stuff in this book is all over the news. They're selling it to the public as if it's a good thing. You see here before you what an average person would buy when they went shopping at the store. Not everything here is bad for you, but much of it has compounds and artificial chemicals that have been added that are extremely toxic and bad for your health, and they have known this the entire time, and they have approved them for use. Let's start with aspartame. You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. They took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero. What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They can feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable.
Are you prepared to lose?